Good morning. Welcome to the Indiana Parks Alliance 2022 Forum. This is IPA's second virtual event, and we're delighted to have you with us. I'm Dan Hinkle. I'm a volunteer and board member with the Indiana Parks Alliance, and it's my pleasure to serve as moderator for the forum. If you participated in last year's webinar or other IPA events, welcome back. If you're new to the Indiana Parks Alliance, I hope you'll check out our website and Facebook page. Oh, and please say hi if you see us at an Earth Day celebration or other event. I'd like to express our thanks to the Eppley Institute for Parks and Public Lands of Indiana University, who are our partners in presenting today's forum. We quite literally couldn't have done this without the Eppley team, who are hosting us on their Zoom webinar platform and have been of great help with planning and preparations. We have 6 speakers today on a range of topics of great interest to us all. The theme that connects them all is stewardship and engagement in Indiana state parks and natural areas. We've built in a little time toward the end of the program for these experts to address your questions. You'll find a Q&A button among the menu items at the bottom of your screen, or maybe elsewhere on your screen, where you can submit a question for one or more of the speakers. So please submit your questions as they occur to you, and we'll cover as many as time allows. Please use the chat button to make comments or for questions about using this Zoom webinar platform. You can direct a chat message to everyone, or to the speakers, or to our tech guru, Ben Martin, for technical help. Please make sure your questions or chat comments are respectful and appropriate. You may want to select Spotlight View so that you can see who's speaking and see their presentation full screen. Okay, let's get started. First, let's call on Tom Homan to explain what IPA has been up to and what to expect in today's forum. Tom Homan is president of the Indiana Parks Alliance. He retired in 2012 from the Indiana Department of Natural Resources, where he had worked for 38 years, the last 16 years as director of the Division of Engineering. Tom is a past president of the Association of Conservation Engineers and a past president of the Indiana Native Plant Society. So Tom, what's IPA been up to?
Okay. So Parks Alliance, and many of you are members, but some aren't. So I want to talk initially about what we do and what our mission is. And IPA is a charitable organization, a 501c3. Our mission is to support and advocate for state parks and state-owned nature preserves. And we do this basically through education, promotion, fundraising, and assistance for local friends groups. And I might add that education and promotion are really very tied together. They're very much related. So talking a little bit about education and promotion, we talk about the needs of state parks and state-owned nature preserves, and talk about what these needs are. As a couple of examples here are one example, we've been talking for years about ever since we were formed, about the facilities in state parks that really needed a lot of money. They'd been very short of funds for deferred maintenance for years. An example of this stairway at Brown County State Park was built by the CCC and deteriorated so badly that it actually had to be closed for a while. And then we also talk about the value of wetlands. That very much became an issue in last year, and IPA was a part of that discussion, trying to advocate for the importance and educate people on the importance. And shown in this photo is a fantastic wetland, a state dedicated nature preserve, Swamp Angel. And so that's part of our mission too. So 2020 highlights. 2021 was an exciting year in a number of ways. A lot of good and obviously some negative things with the wetland issue. But the Governor Holcomb had included in his budget for the year before, for the 2-year biennium, $150 million. And Terry's going to talk about this more later. But and some of that, and Chris, but some of that, 100 million of it was indicated for would be used at DNR. And we thought we were going to lose that when the pandemic hit, but then things improved, and we learned in early 2021 that funding was going to be available for state parks, and it's being put in to use now. An example shown right here, that stairway that I showed you earlier that was in bad shape, this is what it looks like today. Actually, this is what it looked like last summer. It's probably a little bit more grown in now, but it's been totally fixed, and that was a major project. It was also funding in the budget this last year for 2 new state park inns, and there'll be more talk on that later. The inns at Potato Creek and Provincetown State Park. IPA had not been actively advocating for this because it was kind of pie in the sky and we didn't think it was feasible at this time. But then funds became available and we were thrilled when that was included in the budget. Also included funding for conservation land purchases, $25 million, and that was another exciting thing. So there are a lot of highlights in last year for that. Also in 2021, we continued IPA to directly do some things. We continued our treatment of ash trees. The emerald ash borer has been decimating the ash trees in the state, essentially wiping them out, the mature ash trees in parts of the state, or all the state essentially. So we have been treating some select trees, some of the larger trees in a few of the state parks and nature preserves to try to save a remnant population there and to help provide the seed base for that next generation. And there's an interesting photo here. I'll bring my cursor over to the photo. At McCormick's Creek, this right here is a tree that has been treated by IPA and is still thriving. And right next to it is a tree that was not treated and is dead. So very definitely shows in that photo the difference that we're making in some of those areas. We're also provided some grants to local friends groups, which we do every year. And this is a photo of a check presentation at Spring Mill State Park to the local friends group there for some signs along a trail there to identify some of the trees on the trail. Some of those small things that make the visits to the state parks more memorable and enjoyable. We also provided trail counters to DNR because, as you may be aware, during the pandemic, people rediscovered nature and there was a lot more usage of parks and nature reserves and outdoor trails in general. And we found that state parks and nature preserves had no way to quantify what that increased usage was. And so we provided some trail counters so they can do that and make it easier then to prioritize work in the future and to be able to prove to people about that increased use. So during 2022, we're going to continue advocating for state parks and nature preserves. Well, that's our core mission, and we'll continue to do that. We're also going to do some other things. Donaldson Woods at Spring Mill State Park is a old growth woods, fantastic area. And there had been a study done for many years of the large trees in that area, all trees in general. And the gentleman doing that study died, and the study kind of had not been done, followed up on for a number of years. And so John Bacone, one of our board members and former director of nature preserves, decided that it was important to continue that study because we had this great historical data on the nature preserve. And he worked with Sam Shine Foundation and IPA, with thanks to John's work, got a grant from Sam Shine to continue that work, and is going to be doing that study this summer. We're also planning to expand our assistance on trails with some other things, and we're working out the details of that. So watch for those details coming up. And of course, continue our other programs, our grants, support of local friends groups, the ash tree treatment program. Going to continue those programs. And that's pretty much it. I want to leave more. I think I was allotted 15 minutes, and I don't think I used all of that because I want to leave more time for some of our other speakers because they've got a lot to talk about today, and I'm really looking forward to hearing that myself. So with that, I will turn back to Dan.
All right, thanks, Tom. We appreciate your welcome and your leadership with IPA. Our next speaker is Steve Walter, who's Executive Director of the Eppley Institute for Parks and Public Lands. Steve has more than 35 years of service as a leader, manager, executive, and mentor in the fields of parks, recreation, public lands, and tourism. His experience includes executive roles at agencies across 3 states and work at the highest levels of park agencies nationally. as well as local and state nonprofit and for-profit organizations. As the author of numerous innovative master plans and strategic plans, Steve has helped countless parks and recreation agencies build their systems through projects completed by the Eppley Institute. With degrees from the University of Minnesota and Indiana University, Steve is an in-demand speaker at national and international conferences. His expertise in leadership for parks, recreation, and public lands agencies is widely valued by Eppley Institute partners and stakeholders, including the IPA. Okay, Steve, you're up. And again, thanks to you and the Eppley team for all you've done to support this event today.
Thanks, Dan. That was a very wonderful introduction, a little bit long. I'm very fortunate to be the Eppley Institute director. I've been doing that for a long time, as you can tell from the length of what Dan talked about, and most of it's accidental. I think nobody ever intended for Eppley Institute to be this successful, and so I'm grateful every day for my opportunity to do the things I do to help improve parks, public lands, locally in the state or nationally, and I think a little bit globally, which we're going to talk about in a second. I've got 4 slides, and they're not animated, so you can read ahead and you can ask questions. And we all agreed that this would be good to just kind of introduce you to this unique organization of people I lead that have significant impact around the world and around the nation. And sometimes we're fortunate enough to be recognized as an expert and work a little bit at home, which is always a fun thing. So I'm going to share my screen and get into those, and please feel free to answer questions. Ask questions. You can answer them too if you want to. I'm happy to do that. So thank you. So the Institute is almost 30 years old. We were created as a unit of Indiana University in 1993. And what's interesting about that, I think, is that a lot of people at first didn't really know about us. And in fact, we were fairly small and a little tiny operation. We're self-funded mostly now. We used to be completely self-funded, but the university has given us a small appropriation through the state. So we generate a lot of revenue in contracts and grants and program income. But people sometimes think we're very big. And in fact, we're bigger than most, but smaller than what people expect when they show up to our offices. We've got a lot of part-time student staff that we benefit from, giving them real life experiences. And we got 16 full-time staff. In the 30 years that we've worked, and I've been director since 2001, we've had 40 different projects from all over the nation, and you can see all the places that we've worked. There are a few places that aren't on the map: Anchorage, Alaska, some places over in Europe, which we're about to work again in this summer. But we've done a lot of work for federal agencies, the Park Service, BLM, Bureau of Land Management, Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Forest Service. Some work for state parks, not as much. And part of the reason for that is, as Terry Coleman will tell you, there might be 50 state park departments, but there are 50 different state park departments. No state park unit is the same that we can find anywhere in the nation, which is appropriate. And then I think we've probably worked in maybe 100 different localities in different ways. So we just are really a very lucky organization, and very responsive and in demand a bit. We oftentimes get calls saying, would you be happy to do this for us? And we look at our schedule, see if we can fit it in. The other thing we did, which the Park Service set up for us, and we're very grateful to them, is they set up an online learning system around parks, recreation, and outdoors. That's PRO, and I think you probably heard that if you're around state parks, they have the PRO school. So pro-valence is this whole idea that we're stronger together. Valence is the Latin kind of verb or word for being strong. So we've got about 70,000 online learners from around the world, 125 different countries, and we've got over 500 online courses, some of which are free, including a history of Indiana State Parks, which we developed for the State Parks Department during their centennial a few years ago. I think that was 2016. So Eppley, like everything, has gone through some changes, and our university is going through significant changes at this time with new leadership. It's a positive thing when new leaders come in, and we've got a new president, a new vice president for administration and finance, another one, a new provost. So all this is leading to some change. But before that, we were part of a school that was changing to public health. And while we all acknowledge public health as an important part of what we do in Parks and Recreation, it's not the traditional public health school or curriculum focus. So when we started in 1993, we said, okay, we're going to roll forward. Another organization called the National Center on Accessibility, or as you see here, NCA, was created by Indiana University at the same time to focus on accessibility in the outdoors. So it was a great time of investment for the university in outdoors, parks, and public lands. NCA had some situations, and kind of an analysis suggested that they shouldn't replace the director. They should consider whether or not there was a lot of opportunity to merge. We merged, and then they also asked ourselves if we belonged a little bit more importantly at the university level as opposed to the school level. So they elevated us up to the vice president for research offices. And then they decided to invest a little bit of us and move us from an off-campus location to on-campus. So we've had significant changes in the last 4 years. And when you have those in a small organization, sometimes your ability to focus externally is not as good as it should be. You're focused a lot internally with only 16 people. The result has been that we've merged completely with the National Center on Accessibility, and we have a lot of sponsors. So part of the reason that happened, the sponsor means they fund us through contracts or grants, is we all work for the National Park Service, state parks and local parks, so the same people. We had the same process, same kind of opportunities, but just a little different focus. We had the same staffing model, the same revenue model. And after a trial basis from 2019 to 2020, we all said this works well. And so we've been working together now for almost 2 years. And it's been a very good thing for us. We have worked all over the nation doing accessibility barrier reviews or accessibility assessments for Acadia National Park, for Fort Donaldson National Battlefield, for Lincoln Home National Monument in Illinois, and all over the place. As a matter of fact, tomorrow I fly to Fort Monroe, Virginia to do an accessibility assessment. And the issue of serving all peoples, which is what our new home in the Indiana Institute for Disability and Community in the Vice President's office is focused on, is really good, because with the pandemic and equity issues, inclusion issues, and there's a lot of those that might be ethnic, they might be racial, they might be socioeconomic, which we're finding a tremendous amount of inequities around that. That's sort of our focus with the National Center on Accessibility in Eppley for a while, is to help create opportunities for all peoples to use the great outdoors in all of our parks and public lands. Lastly, I just want to share with you our accessibility focus, because it has opened up a great opportunity to work with Indiana State Parks. With the state funding that we've received, Director Coleman from the state parks and I have been talking about how can we help in our own state. The whole idea that we might not be an expert in our home state, but maybe we are, we just are not very visible. So what we have an opportunity to do is work, and we put this off for a little bit due to staffing on our part and a little bit of staffing challenges with state parks. We put it off from this spring. We were supposed to have it done or started and almost done by now to the fall. But what we decided we wanted to do is take the initiative to fund and provide state parks with a positive impact to all peoples, and especially focusing on inclusion and access to Indiana State Parks. It aligns very well with Indiana Parks Alliance and what you do in terms of accessibility. I think it aligns with what State Parks is trying to do with some of the deferred maintenance funds they have. But what we decided to do is do kind of a trial basis training program at Spring Mill State Park this fall. And so we'll focus on an in-service training for state park personnel to give them all the most current knowledge about accessibility, particularly focusing on program access. The ABA and the ADA have been around for a long time, and we pretty much get a good handle on physical barriers, but programmatic access, where people can experience the same programs as able-bodied people, is sometimes difficult to achieve and very difficult to understand. So we hope to do the AXS, which is our short acronym. We're acronym heavy at Eppley because we work for the federal agency. So AXS is barrier review for Indiana State Park, starting in Spring Mill State Park this fall. And then we're hoping that can grow, and then from that model we can learn and see if there's other things that need to be happening at Indiana State Parks that we can help with, and particularly maybe also with DNR, and then maybe that'll cascade to local parks. So we're very grateful to be able to do all of the things that we do. We're very fortunate to be part of Indiana University and part of this unique world we work in, which is, the parks, outdoor recreation, and public lands world. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have, and very grateful and happy to help IPA with all the work that they're doing, which is really important to our state parks.
All right, Steve, thanks very much. For a lean crew, you certainly have a lot going on. Now we call on Terry Coleman to share what's been going on in Indiana State Parks and a glimpse of what's in store. Terry has been director of Indiana State Parks since 2020, but he began working for the division more than 40 years ago. Previously, he had been deputy director of state parks and then served as interim director when his predecessor, Dan Bortner, was named DNR director. Terry truly worked his way up, starting as a seasonal employee at Pokagon State Park the day after graduating from high school in Fort Wayne. He served as maintenance repair person, assistant property manager, and regional manager. Terry earned a degree in natural resources and biology at Ball State University. Terry, I know you're excited to tell us all that's going on in the state parks, so let's hear it.
Thanks, Dan, and thanks for organizing all this. We're thrilled to be with you here today. And also, I want to thank Steve and Eppley. They've become such a confidant and partner with Indiana State Parks, someone that we can always go to if we need a resource or a little advice. Steve and I have a standing call once a month, and I always walk away with a new tool or something that's very beneficial. Also, many thanks to all of you who serve on the Indiana Parks Alliance. Your enthusiasm and passion is so appreciated, as are your tireless efforts. So we appreciate having that team behind us as we go forward. So good morning also to everyone that joins us. It's nothing less than a very exciting time to be associated with Indiana State Parks and Indiana State Park Inns. There are a bunch of moving parts right now, and we're positioned really for great things. So I'm going to move kind of right to our report. We have so much that we want to share with all of you. It was really hard narrowing it down. Importantly, I was kind of asked today to focus on Indiana State Park Inns, but I want to share a bunch of information that I think that and hope that you all might find or have some interest in. So our operating budget now is about $42,179,179. So just about 42 million too, and it's called a blended budget, which means it's a blended budget of dedicated funds, meaning funds that were generated through fees and charges, and also funds from the Indiana General Assembly. So currently in our funding package of our blended budget, we pull about 35 million too out of our dedicated fund. And we get about 3.5, almost 3.6 million from the Indiana General Assembly, which gives us a total of about 38.8. So that's our approved budget. But then we're also permitted to augment our budget from the dedicated account for about another 3.4, bringing our total to about 42,179,179. That's our total approved to spend, for the lack of a better way to describe it. So I want you all to remember 42,179,179 as we go into the next talk, or the next phase of my talk. Sorry, in FY21, in fiscal year 21, last year, the park side of the business brought in 48 million. That was 14 more million than we had made in the previous year in FY20. And FY20 was a banner year as well. It was a record year. So we jumped 14 million. And we saw that across the nation in just about every state park system out there. They saw just unbridled enthusiasm and visitation numbers like none of us have ever seen. This year, our projections are suggesting that we'll be on a pace for about 44 to 45 million, down about 4 or 5%. which we really figured we'd be down significantly further than that. But I think that this push towards natural areas and public lands has really continued to catch on, and it's still very popular across the nation. So we're not going to drop by anything near like what we had planned to drop. So we're really counting on a very busy summer recreation season. At the end of December 2021, just about 3 months ago, our balance in our dedicated fund was about 24 million. And yeah, 24 million was what we had in savings. So for about the last 5 or 6 years, the state budget agency has allowed us to come in and augment our operating budget when we have a surplus or an account balance in our dedicated fund that will support that. And so this year we really went to work. And so we've been provided the opportunity to augment our budget, and I'll just share a few things. So we're in the process of spending about 1.1 million at the golf course to replace all of our golf cars and all of our mowing and greens equipment. So about 600,000 for new golf cars. But unfortunately, with the pandemic and the supply chain issues, they're out about 18 months, but we're in queue. The money's encumbered, and same with the mowing and greens equipment. We were provided with the opportunity to bring over 1.5 million for cyclic vehicle replacement, which in about the last 7-8 years, -1, we've been able to bring on funding to replace vehicles, which has been great. 2.4 million we're going to bring over and are bringing over for some heavy equipment replacement. We'll be adding a new excavator, a big articulated payloader for Indiana Dunes, and we'll begin to replace several backhoe loaders and skid steer loaders across our system. We're going to grab $1 million, and we're going to purchase, we're already receiving actually the beginnings of our purchase of 85 frontline mowers and about 10 small mowers 10 small tractors that'll pull great big batwing units for mowing large areas. We're going to pull 1.5 million over to what we call small campground improvement projects, which allows us to divide some of that money up and to be able to hand a manager an extra $30,000 or $40,000 for some small improvement plans, specifically targeted for the campgrounds, which obviously generates a tremendous amount of our revenue. Most of our revenue is generated from overnight stays on the park side of our business in the campground. And then about 500,000 we pulled over for invasive management contracts and also some burning equipment and some personal protection gear for our folks that work with fire. Our biggest challenge right now is staffing, and we absolutely are seeing and feeling the great resignation. In the summertime, in our summer recreation season, we hire about 1,600 less than full-time employees between our inns and parks. Last year, as we moved into the season, we were always at least 450 people shy of where we needed to be. And it even looks like it's going to be tougher this year. For example, just on Monday, we spoke to the manager at Monroe Lake, Jim Roach, and last year at this time, he had 128 applications for 90 positions at Monroe. And this year he has 21 applications for 90 positions. So we're really almost in a panic now, and we're working directly with HR. We're using Facebook, we're using Instagram, we're using everything known to us to try to get the word out that these jobs are available. So for all of you, if you have friends, family, relatives, kids, grandkids, please send them to work. We need staff. One of the greatest things that we've got going right now are 17 sewer and water projects where we're making municipal connections to get out of the sewer and water business. We've been working with the Division of Engineering, Michael Mathias, our sanitary engineer, and Jim McGough with the Indiana Finance Authority. And we've been able to make connections with municipalities and towns and cities use their engineering folks to bring sewer and water lines where applicable, and also to upgrade the services and the properties to get us out of those businesses. And so with the Indiana Finance Authority, what happens is Jim McGough is authorizing these projects to move forward. They'll be designed and put on the ground, and then that debt will be relieved by Indiana Finance Authority. As just a quick example, we were going to have to put new treatment plants on the ground at Tippecanoe River State Park, at Harmony, and at Deem Lake. And just pushing those all off and being able to make connections will save at least $8 million just in the initial capital that we would have had to expend to put those on the ground. So let me shift over real quick, and we've got so much to share today on Indiana State Park Inns. So I'll give you a quick state of the state update on the inns. Strong sales as a result, and following the pandemic. The weekend business is absolutely booming with frequent sellouts. Corporate business is slightly up, but still down about 60%. We've been down about 70% in our corporate sales throughout. It's just, as we all know, people are working from home. There's not many conferences and retreats and those kinds of things. However, Ma and Pa Hoosier and out-of-state guests are staying with us with their families at an alarming rate. It's great. And so we found some new revenue there, and our average daily rates are moving up. So I've got lots to report on the system. Most importantly, Senate Bill 186 that codifies Indiana State Park Inns as a body corporate politic or a quasi to state government passed. It allows us to continue to operate our business outside of the state purchasing rules and regulations, which allows us to move forward and act like a business. And it's still a for-profit business operated within the Division of State Parks, but it is absolutely codified now in state code. So that is a real legacy piece and something that resolves problems that we've had for 50 years. So we are extremely excited. What that also, one of the most important pieces of that is it qualifies our associates that work for Indiana State Park Inns to become a part of PERF. They can take over they can become part of the Public Employees Retirement Fund, and they qualify for the health benefit package that are offered to state employees. So as you might imagine, for retention and recruitment, those are critical. In a normal year, the inns do about $27.5 million worth of sales. At Fort Harrison, we've got a significant HVAC project that'll top about $1 million that's currently underway. At Potawatomi Inn at Pokagon State Park, we're working with a design company to kind of redecorate what has become a very threadbare and worn facility. When you operate hotels that have a 58 or 60% occupancy rate, which any brand hotel would love to have a 58 or 60% occupancy rate, we're wearing it down. So we're excited about that. At Turkey Run Inn at Turkey Run State Park, we've got about $2.5 million currently aimed at a project for some mold remediation following a complete restoration and replacement of the roof, which was about $1.7 million. And so we'll restore another 9 affected rooms, bringing that total to about 25 rooms and hallways and quarters that will and have been redone by the time that project ends. At Spring Mill Inn at Spring Mill State Park, we've got $10 or $15 million aimed at a huge project that will require the closure of Spring Mill Inn on November 13th of this year for probably about 18 months. It's a major renovation and modernization that will include gutting the rooms, bringing the rooms back out from the studs out, restoring lobby areas and renovations of the lobby, redesign of the lobby, removal of the indoor pool and installation of an indoor water feature similar to a splash pad outside. It'll include kitchen renovations, renovations to the conference facilities, and also HVAC renovations throughout the entire inn. So we're really excited about that, long overdue. As you all know, that's our newest state park inn, built in 1939, which leads me next to the work that's planned at Potato Creek State Park. And for Potato Creek Lodge, our new lodge, there's about $60 million that was allocated for that. The design consultant has been selected. It's Hafer out of Evansville. And the construction manager consultant is Skillman. It's an Indianapolis-based company with offices in northern Indiana. And we had our first meeting Tuesday with the design consultant and the construction manager consultant, along with the Indiana Department of Administration and ID&R engineering, and have started to move that process forward. Yesterday, we had a flyover for the survey work for the property, and the site selection is Whispering Winds Picnic Area, which is a pretty quick location when you come in through the gate. It's kind of nestled in a crook on the shoreline of Wooster Lake, and it'll kind of have a northeasterly view across the lake. The schematic for this and the thought for this was actually completed in 2001 through a process with Troyer Group out of Mishawaka under Director Pajic's leadership. Troyer then came back to the table and updated the plan in 2005, and again in 2015 during the Pence administration, and again in 2020 during the Hulk administration. So we've got a good schematic and some good thoughts in place that during Director Pajic's administration was put in place and obviously modified for the next several years. So the design concept kind of focuses on a heavy beam and stone lodge type construction, as you would expect, about 100 to 110 rooms, whatever the site will hold appropriately, full service restaurant, banquet and conference facilities, indoor aquatics operation, indoor informal gathering locations, exterior observation areas, lakeside docking, and other guest amenities that we've all come to expect. One of the neat things, as I mentioned earlier, with the work that we're doing with the Indiana Finance Authority, IFA, we'd been in conversations prior to, and then have expedited those conversations with the town of North Liberty. And North Liberty is poised and ready and has capacity to be able to bring us water and sewer. So we're going to get out of the water and sewer business for all of Potato Creek State Park. And we're also hoping to use that same corridor that they bring the utilities from the town to the park as a bike hike connection to Potato Creek State Park. So we're hoping to see all of those come in line. So oversight for the Potato Creek Lodge project will be the Indiana Department of Administration in tandem with DNR's Division of Engineering and of course Deputy Director Karen Hinton, who heads our inns and lodges. She will rest assured she will make sure that goes well. We've also been in initial contact with the recognized Miami tribe and have additional conversations planned for the recognized tribes to move that project forward as well. And then lastly, conceptually, we're beginning to think about and talk about, and we've got feasibility studies done for not only Potato Creek Lodge, but also for the Prophetstown Lodge as well. We've got a site selected there, and we'll begin conversations with the recognized tribes at Prophetstown as well. So Dan, that's kind of just a peek into what's going on in Indiana State Parks, and particularly Indiana State Park Inns.
So that's all you got? No, I know there's more going on.
There's way more.
Hey, Terry, thanks a lot. And I can't wait to make reservations at the new lodge, Potato Creek.
Thanks, Dan.
All right. One of the great challenges facing those who manage both public and private lands is managing invasive species. We'll get an insider's take on the issue now from Stephanie Schuck. Stephanie is Executive Director of State of Indiana Cooperative Invasives Management. She formerly served as restoration ecologist and land manager for the Nina-Mason Pulliam Ecolab property on the Marian University campus. Stephanie is also past president for the Environmental Education Association of Indiana. She's a member of the Invasive Plant Advisory Committee for the Indiana Invasive Species Council and a board member for the Indianapolis-Marion County Tree Board and the Indiana Parks Alliance. So Stephanie, please educate us on the fight against invasives.
Hi, so thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I love getting any chance to talk about invasive species and make sure that more people are aware. So I'm going to share my presentation. And so I'm going to be talking about the Indiana Invasives Initiative. So this is a project of SICM. So I'm the executive director of SICM, which is the State of Indiana Cooperative Invasive Management. And the Indiana Invasives Initiative, we'll call that the III, is a partnership agreement with the USDA. And so that was initiated in late 2017. It was, well, here, I'll go ahead and go. So we'll talk about SICM just a little bit, because I know that some of you might not be familiar with SICM. And by the way, before I forget, I wanted to ask if you are familiar with SICM, or if you have participated or maybe led a weed wrangle, or you are involved with one of the SISMAs in Indiana, go ahead and put that in the chat. I'd like to see who's here. If you are like, what is a SISMA and what is a weed wrangle and what is a SICM, that's okay. Hopefully in the next 10 minutes, I will tell you what that is. I'm going to start my timer so that I don't go over too far. So SICM was originally the Southern Indiana Cooperative Invasive Management. And so they were started in 2008. So SISMAs are these cooperative invasive species management areas. So these are locally led groups that deal with invasive species in their area. And so SICM originally was covered the southern portion of the state, so about 35 states within the southern portion of Indiana. And then in 2018, the Indiana Invasives Initiative was created, and they expanded their range throughout the state of Indiana. And so a little bit about the contribution agreement. So the main goal was to promote awareness and management, create management of invasive plants in Indiana, to educate the public, of course, and to establish these SISMAs, these cooperative invasive species management groups throughout the state. Ideally, we would love to have one in each county. We have several counties that have partnered up to create SISMAs over the last few years. And so it was really important for us to create these partnerships. So we can't rely on one organization to deal with invasive species. And I'm sure I'm probably preaching to the choir, but invasive species can be a plant or an animal. We focus on plants, but they can devastate our natural areas. They lower the biodiversity. They affect the soil, therefore affecting water quality, therefore affecting the ecosystem services they provide for us. They are very expensive, so they cause economic harm. We were talking about the emerald ash borer earlier. And they also can cause harm to human health. So they're a big deal, and there's not one organization that can take it on. And so SICM saw this as creating these partnerships throughout Indiana to make it more sustainable, to make this type of work more sustainable. You have to bring the community in if you want a project to be sustainable. So what is a SISMA? I mentioned it a little bit, but I just want to clarify things. So we love our acronyms, right? But there's a lot of words there. But basically, it's a partnership. So it's a partnership between lots of different types of organizations. So that could be county, that could be state, that could be federal, that could be nonprofits, citizen groups. All of the above can be involved in these SISMAs, and they all should be. And every county is different, right? So they all have different resources. They all have different habitats. And so every county might be a little bit different in who they partner with and how they get work done. So our current program, we have 5 regional specialists, 1 project coordinator, 1 executive director, that's myself. We have the SICM board, and then there are just some of our partners. I always hate like mentioning some partners, because then I'm like, I know I'm going to forget somebody. So we are federally funded with the NRCS grant, but then we also do a lot of fundraising, and we get a lot of support through things like the Clean Water Indiana program, through the State Soil Board. We work a lot with SWCDs, the Soil and Water Conservation Districts, Purdue Extension, IDNR, of course, Department of Agriculture. So, I mean, on and on, Land Trust. So we do work with a lot of, we try to work with as many organizations throughout the state as we can, because the more we can partner, the more we can get things done. We do a lot of work in county and city parks as well. And so here is a actually old map. I just updated it on our website. And by the way, since, you know, I've got so much information, I know we all do. And so I want to kind of give an overview. And then I'm also going to put some links in the chat once I'm done. So I'll put a link to our website with all the information that you need, and then a link to a few other things as well. And feel free to put a question in the chat too, and I'll try to look at that after I'm done to answer any questions. And I know we'll have questions, time for questions at the end. So our SISMAs, I think we are up to 37 SISMAs now in Indiana. And I know I mentioned that some of them are one per county, and then some we have some counties that are partnering up for one SISMA. So the blue is just a formed and active SISMA. So we ask a few things for them to be considered active. They have a mission statement, they have a name, they're meeting on a regular basis, they have committees, they have written annual goals with metrics, and they're also conducting outreach. Those orange counties are SISMAs that are organizing. So they might have brought their partners together, but they might not have leadership yet, or they might not have written a mission statement or have a logo or things like that. Green is future. So they're working on things. They might be doing weed wrangles. We have several counties that they might not have a formed and active SISMA, but they are still conducting weed wrangles and work days to remove invasive species. So of course, SISMAs are working in state parks. So I mentioned our regional specialists a little bit ago. So they do a few things, and well, they do a lot of things, but a few really big things. And one of those things is helping these SISMAs get their feet on the ground and helping them create these partnerships. So these are some, I love fun pictures of people smiling, maybe under their masks or not. So SISMAs are working in state parks. We have a SISMA working in Tippecanoe River State Park. We have work being done at Turkey Run. I know the Montgomery SISMA has work days planned at Shade State Park. And we've had SISMAs working at McCormick's Creek State Park too, I think Spring Mill as well. There are probably more, but I just wanted to let you know that they are active in state parks. And I only see this increasing. So I only see this partnership growing stronger. We know we have a lot of parkland. And like I said, we can't rely or expect the DNR to be able to handle the invasive species problem. It is a big job, and we need lots of hands to do it. And it also gives the communities ownership for it, right? So if they start to understand and have an awareness of the negative effects of invasive species, and then they know you give them something to do about it, they feel like part of the community. They feel like they're helping those parks that they visit all the time. And it's not that big of a deal, right? Just go out for a few work days every year, and you really do make a huge dent. So here are some more pictures of happy faces doing some weed wrangles. So I mentioned the work days and the weed wrangles. So weed wrangle is actually a nationwide thing. So it's not ours. It's trademarked and everything, but we do have Weed Wrangle Indiana. And so our SISMAs do these weed wrangles, and we ask for a few things when they do those. So we ask that they register their event, give us some information on it, and then give us information afterwards. So how much space did you work on? How many acres? How many people were there? What species did you work on? How many times have you gone out? Ideally, we ask that they do at least three work days in one location. This also helps them to understand the length of time it takes to work on invasive species, because we know if you're working on really any invasive species, but you cut a bunch of bush honeysuckle down, one year and then you're like, okay, we're done. We're not done, right? You have to go back. And you have to go back several years sometimes, depending on what species you're dealing with. So again, that gives them ownership, and they can see then the positive impact they're having throughout the year or throughout the years on these different areas. Sometimes it's really hard working on invasive species because you don't have that immediate satisfaction. And so we understand that. I understand that as a restoration ecologist, but it's hard to be able to give people that understanding that, you might not see it right away, but you will see it. So these weed wrangles are a great way to do that and to bring in the community. So they are public events. Usually, I think most of them are public events, and so they will get information out. And it's also an educational event. So they don't just bring people in, give them a pair of loppers and say, go cut those things. They talk about it. What is bush honeysuckle? What is privet? What is barberry? Why are we cutting them? What are the negative effects they have on our natural areas? What is an invasive species? And then they go and do it. So it's also an educational event for the community. So the invasive plant management teams, or some people call them strike teams. So these are a little more targeted. And so a lot of our SISMAs have them, and more are popping up. So it's kind of like a committee of the SISMA. And usually these strike team or IPM team events are not public. They have a group of targeted individuals within their SISMA. Ideally, we have at least one person that has a pesticide applicator's license. They know how to identify invasive species. They know where they're going, and they go out often. So they will partner with different organizations. Like, again, it might be DNR, it might be state parks, it might be a city or a county park, it might be a land trust. And they kind of take ownership of a certain piece of land or a certain park, and they go out several times a year. And so we also provide grants for them. So grants for the SISMAs. So we have a SISMA conference that's actually coming up in August, August 17th. And we invite all of our SISMA partners to come to it. It's a great networking opportunity. SISMAs, newer SISMAs and older SISMAs can kind of network and bounce ideas off of each other. But we also have sponsors for that conference, and all that money goes right back to the SISMAs, right back to weed wrangles, outreach events. A lot of our SISMAs are doing invasive swap out. So if you cut a pear tree down, a calorie pear tree, they'll give you a service berry, something like that. So they use these funds for things like that. Our strike teams will also use those funds for tools or anything that they might need. So here's my information. I went through that really fast. There's so much information, but I also didn't want to like bombard you with everything in like 14 minutes. So my contact information is there. I mentioned our project coordinator, that's Don Slack. Some of you might know Don. Will Drews with the Knox County SWCD. He is the current board chair for SICM. Please reach out to me if you have any questions. We do, our regional specialists and myself and Don and a lot of the board for SICM will do outreach events. So if you want somebody to come speak to your group or speak to your employees about invasive species, we'd be happy to do that. If you are interested in creating a SISMA or being involved with a SISMA in your county, you can go to our website and you can see who your regional specialist is. So they are throughout the state of Indiana. Each regional specialist has several counties that they work with to help get these SISMAs off the ground. They also do landowner surveys. So if you or if somebody you know has some land, and that could be less than 10 acres, that can be more than 10 acres, but we'll do landowner surveys focusing on invasive species. So if you know you have invasive species on your land, or if you're not sure and you want to manage for them, then that is a great way to learn about that. So they'll come out to your property, they'll take a walk with you, they'll do some identification, and not just all the bad stuff, right? All the good stuff too. Well, you have a lot of bush honeysuckle, but you also have these really nice native species too. So they'll give you a general overview of that, and then help you with your management plan for your invasive species. So I think my time is up, so I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen. But like I said, I'll put some things in the chat. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them in the chat as I can.
Okay, Stephanie, thanks so much for that update on the important work that SISMAs are doing statewide, and also for your help in planning and promoting the forum today. I am pleased to announce that we have record participation today, which means a few more people than last year. And we're getting some thoughtful questions from participants. Some are being addressed in the chat function live, and we hope to address the others during the Q&A session a little bit later. Well, some of the best places to see an array of native species is Indiana's network of nature preserves. We've asked Scott Namaste to show us some of the newer and lesser known nature preserves in northern Indiana. Scott has over 20 years of experience with the flora of the Great Lakes region and the Midwestern United States, and he's the botanist at the Indiana Natural Heritage Data Center, which is part of the Indiana Department of Natural Resources Division of Nature Preserves. Scott is co-author of Wildflowers of the Midwest from Timber Press and Wildflowers of the Indiana Dunes National Park from Indiana University Press, both available this May. Scott serves as a board member for NatureSite, the Center for Integrative Taxonomy and Ecology, and for the North Chapter of the Indiana Native Plant Society and the South Bend Elkhart Audubon Society. He's on the advisory council for the Shirley Hines Land Trust and the planning committee for the Indiana Dunes Birding Festival, and is active with the Indiana Native Plant Society and the Indiana Academy of Science. So, Scott, please take us to some of your favorite places in northern Indiana.
Thanks, Dan, and good morning. I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak to you today here at the Indiana Parks Alliance Forum, and to tell you about some of the new and the lesser known northern Indiana nature preserves. So to set the stage for that, I want to talk a little bit about the Nature Preserves Act. This was passed in 1967, and this basically paved the way for the Division of Nature Preserves, which allowed us to identify, protect, and manage nature preserves, state-dedicated nature preserves throughout the state for the last 55 years. Our first state-dedicated nature preserve was at Pine Hills, which is at Shades State Park, and that was dedicated in 1969. And we currently protect almost 300 nature preserves around the state in nearly all of Indiana's counties. 72 of Indiana's 92 counties we have nature preserves. And within those counties, we protect over 54,000 acres of land, of the best of wild Indiana and natural Indiana. And these areas that we protect include examples of almost all of our natural communities that have been identified in the state. Dedication of a nature preserve is the highest level of protection that we can have for a piece of land in the state. So if for example, if a land trust owns a property and they protect it, if that land trust were to go out of business or were to sell that property would no longer be protected. But if it's dedicated as a state dedicated nature preserve, in addition to being owned by that land trust, that protection goes with that property and stays with that property, so that property would still be protected. So we dedicate those highest quality areas, those remnants of what was once wild and natural Indiana, as part of our nature preserve system. And I mentioned land trusts. We work with a number of different organizations, these land trusts, city and county government and parks departments, other divisions of the Department of Natural Resources, like the Division of Forestry, the Division of State Parks, the Division of Fish and Wildlife. In fact, 46 different owners have property that are properties that are dedicated as state dedicated nature preserves. And one thing that might be of interest to the Indiana Parks Alliance members is that we have at least one dedicated nature preserve in every state park in the state, with the exception of Falls of the Ohio. And that's thanks in large part to Terry's predecessor, Dan Bortner, who's now the director of the Department of Natural Resources. But at the time, he was the director of Division of State Parks. And Dan made it his goal and his initiative to have a state park, or have a dedicated nature preserve in every one of Indiana's state parks, with the exception of Falls of the Ohio, because it also has federal protection. So he didn't feel like that was necessary. But he kind of foresaw this additional infrastructure that was taking place in a lot of the state parks, and he wanted to set aside land in each one of these state parks that would not be touched, that would be natural Indiana, so that any resident of Indiana or any visitor to the state could go to a state park and still have a chance to see one of these nature preserves and one of these wild or natural Indiana locations. So thanks to Dan for his foresight in making that happen. So as we look at a map of Indiana, I'm going to start showing some images of some of the places that we protect around the state. And you'll see that they really range in the types of natural communities that they protect. They're scattered all over the state. We protect the best of the best in terms of swamps and fens and bogs and dune habitat and glades and cliffs and caves and different geologic features as well. Some of the prairies up in the northwest part of the state. Also some of the coastal plain marshes up in northwest Indiana, and the Brown County Hills, of course, as well. So we really protect a wide range of places and some of the best that occur within Indiana at the Division of Nature Preserves. So what's new in terms of Division of Nature Preserves in the last few years? Here's a list of all of the preserves that have been added as new nature preserves, newly dedicated nature preserves since 2018. And you can see these range throughout the state in terms of the counties in which they're located. And this is just the list of brand new nature preserves. This doesn't include places where we had a nature preserve and we've added property on around that. We have many of those additions as well, but these are just the brand new nature preserves since 2018. So we've been pretty active in the last few years. And the two that I'm going to highlight here in a minute in northern Indiana are Leidick Bog Nature Preserve and Siebert Woods Nature Preserve. So when I was asked to talk about the new and lesser known preserves in northern Indiana, I first had to kind of decide, what is northern Indiana? How do you define northern Indiana? And it can be defined in a lot of different ways, but I think the best way to define northern Indiana is probably to use the red line that's shown here, which is the southernmost extent of the Wisconsin glaciation, an event that happened 1,000 years ago and lasted until about 13,000 years ago, when that northern half to 2/3 of the state was covered in a huge sheet of ice. And so we have different landscape features, different geology, deeper soils generally up in the northern part of the state than there are in the southern part of the state. So a lot of times we use that as our cutoff of northern and southern Indiana. But for the purposes of this event, I really wanted to focus on true northern Indiana, those really, really northern sites. The two that I'm going to talk about are way up at the Indiana and Michigan state line almost. And they protect natural communities that you're not going to find very far south of the very northern tier of counties in the state. And so these are the two properties that I'm going to talk about. And we'll start with Siebert Woods Nature Preserve, which is the shaded box that's being pointed at with that orangish red arrow. So Siebert Woods Nature Preserve is in LaPorte County. It was dedicated as a state dedicated nature preserve in 2019, and it's owned by the LaPorte County Parks Department. I co-authored a paper in 2010 on the flora of the property with Keith Board. And we published this in the journal, The Michigan Botanist. And if you're interested in reading about the flora and the natural communities at Siebert Woods, you can very easily Google or do a search for Siebert property and The Michigan Botanist, and that paper should show up. And so this work that Keith and I did out at Siebert Woods really paved the way for the protection of this property, because before we did this survey, we really didn't know what was out there in terms of the plant species, plant communities, the rare plants especially. Siebert Woods is about 40 acres, and it's currently there is no official parking at Siebert Woods, but there is parking along the road that's between Siebert Woods and, if you can see my cursor here, the property just north of it, which is called Wintergreen Woods Nature Preserve. And so you can park right along that road and follow the deer trails into the Siebert Woods Nature Preserve. But I should say that there are plans in the works currently for a parking area, a small parking area at Siebert Woods and trails through the property. So soon enough, you'll be able to park at and walk the trails within Siebert Woods. But in the meantime, you can feel free to park along the road there in between those two properties. And there are trails at Wintergreen Woods, which again is just north of Siebert Woods. And over here, this large chunk of land is Ambler Flatwoods Nature Preserve, which is protected by the Shirley Hines Land Trust. And there's parking and there are trails in that large nature preserve. And all three of these preserves protect some similar habitat, which I'll talk about here in a second. So the main plant community of interest at Siebert Woods is what we call the boreal flatwoods. And this is defined by some people as pin oak, swamp white oak, black gum, red maple flatwoods, a pretty unique community that's critically imperiled and generally is found north of Indiana, but reaches its southern extent here in the northwestern part of the state. And that boreal flatwoods is at all three of those preserves that I mentioned. Also at Siebert Woods are plant communities such as mesic upland forest, shrub swamp, sand barrens, and some seasonal ponds. So during the work that Keith Ward and I conducted at this property, we documented a total of 434 plant taxa on the property, and just this 40-acre property, which is pretty incredible. And 362 of those are native to northern Indiana. And this includes a number of rare plant species, and especially some what we consider boreal relic species that are more common further north of Indiana and are relics of the time when our climate was much cooler. Things like on the left here, this paper birch, and on the right, gold thread. Those are both rare plants that are boreal relics that are protected here at Siebert Woods Nature Preserve. And this one on the top is of particular interest to me. This is Canada fly honeysuckle, which is a native shrub that was considered extirpated from Indiana until we found it at Siebert Woods during this study. So this is the only place in the state where this thing is still known to exist. And on the bottom is one of our club mosses. Siebert Woods has a lot of different club moss species, so you can go to Siebert Woods any time of year. These remain green in the winter. You can go any time of year and see some color out at Siebert Woods Nature Preserve. It's a great place to go. The next property I want to talk about is Leidick Bog Nature Preserve. And Leidick Bog is in St. Joseph County. It was dedicated in 2019, and it's owned by Shirley Hines Land Trust. I was part of the group that actually discovered this bog in 2014, and you can read about that discovery in a paper that I wrote called The Book in the Bog. I published it in 2018. You can just do a quick search for The Book in the Bog, and you should be able to find it. Leidick Bog protects over 170 acres of property there, and there is parking, ample parking on the property. There are trails through the site. There are restroom facilities. There's a boardwalk and a platform that have newly been added that allow you to see the bog firsthand. So the property protects a number of plant communities, things like dry mesic upland forest and swamp and seepage wetlands. There's some restoration underway to try to restore some old field habitats and former agricultural land to more natural communities. But of course, the focus of this property is the bog itself, which is shown on the left here. And this is a very sensitive habitat, and that's why Shirley Hines Land Trust wanted to allow people to see the bog, but not actually walk in the bog. So they installed this boardwalk and platform very recently. I think it just opened last weekend, in fact. But you can enjoy the bog habitat, but still stay on the trails. It really is imperative to stay on the trails at this property. So Leidick Bog has a total of 621 plant taxa known from the property, and 495 of those are native species. The bog proper, so those numbers are for the entire site. The bog proper has about 85 plant species known, but nearly all of these are native species, and they're conservative to remnant natural areas, and particularly to bog habitats. Bogs are generally acidic in chemistry, and they're wet communities, so there aren't a lot of plants that can tolerate those conditions. So generally they're species poor, and that's the case here at Leidick Bog as well, with only 85 species. But there are a number of rare plants here that in Indiana are restricted to this bog natural community, and that are incredible plants that are out here at Leidick Bog. And so some of these are carnivorous plants, like on the top in the middle here is purple pitcher plant, on the bottom is round-leaved sundew. We have a lot of plants in the heath family, such as this leatherleaf shown on the left. And then we have several orchids found in Leidick Bog, like this green addersmouth orchid, which is a state endangered orchid that wasn't known from St. Joseph County until we found it out at Leidick Bog when we discovered the bog itself. And all of these plants are located on sphagnum moss, which you can see in this image on the right as well, kind of a mat of sphagnum covering the bog. And there are things like poison sumac and tamarack at this property as well, as you would expect. So I just also wanted to point out a couple of the lesser known northern Indiana nature preserves, and I'll just say a few words about each of these. Blue Cast Springs Nature Preserve is owned by Acres Land Trust. It's located in Allen County and protects some flatwoods community and also some floodplain forest. Coastal Plain Ponds Nature Preserve is an incredible place that protects the globally imperiled inland coastal plain marsh natural community. This is in Jasper County at Jasper County Fish and Wildlife Area. Elkhart Bog Nature Preserve is a bog natural community as well, similar to Leidick Bog. It's in Elkhart County, and it's owned and managed by the Department of Natural Resources Division of Nature Preserves, and we're currently in the process of putting in a boardwalk at this property as well. So you could go up to Elkhart County and see a bog firsthand as well. Kankakee Fen Nature Preserve is the image up here on the top left. It's a tiny nature preserve owned by the Nature Conservancy, but it protects a fantastic fen natural community. Lee Perfect Lake Nature Preserve over on the top right is owned by Acres Land Trust. This is a site that protects fen natural community as well as the surrounding mesoupland forests, and it's in Steuben County up in the northeastern corner of the state. Liverpool Nature Preserve, shown here down on the bottom, is in Lake County, and it protects oak savanna, dry oak savanna with black oaks dominant, but also of most interest is this wet sand flat natural community that's shown in the image. Mongo Quinong Nature Preserve is one of my favorites in the northern part of the state. This is a Pigeon River Fish and Wildlife Area, and it protects some of the most fantastic fens that are present in Indiana. Great natural communities there. And then Thompson Bog Nature Preserve in LaPorte County is another bog natural community that's owned and managed by the Department of Natural Resources Division of Nature Preserves. There is no public access at this bog, though. So quickly to wrap up, our goal is to have 300 nature preserves in 2023. We're really close to that goal, and we think we'll be able to meet it. We're continuing to add additional land in various different ways. In some cases, we're adding conservation easements on properties that are around our existing nature preserves with an overall goal of trying to increase the average acres of protection that we have. So our smallest nature preserve is just over an acre in size, believe it or not, and our largest is over 3,300 acres. But we're trying to increase that average acreage of protection for all of our preserves combined. And we're continuing to look for places to preserve that are unrepresented or underrepresented natural communities, things like the Sinkhole Pond natural community and the Southern Bottomlands dry mesoupland forest, two communities that we don't have currently in our nature preserves portfolio. So with that, if anybody has questions, feel free to put those in the chat, and I'll be happy to try to answer those later. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Scott, thanks so much. And thanks for keeping it on time too. Boy, you nailed that. I can't wait to try my new monocular on hikes through some of those great areas, and now I'll know what to look for. As was mentioned earlier, one of the major recent successes in conservation advocates, including the IPA, advocated for was the inclusion in the current state budget of $100 million to address deferred maintenance needs on state properties. Here to give us the skinny on what that means for the Indiana DNR is Chris Smith. Chris is a 24-year veteran with the Indiana Department of Natural Resources. He currently serves as Deputy Director of the Operations Bureau, which includes the divisions of state parks, fish and wildlife, forestry, nature preserves, land acquisition, and communications. Chris grew up in Mitchell, Indiana, where he began his career with the department as a seasonal employee at Spring Mill State Park while attending Indiana State University. He's held other leadership roles within the DNR, serving as Deputy Director of the Regulatory Bureau and as Legislative Director. When he's not working, Chris enjoys kayaking with his wife, Missy, as well as fishing, and training an extremely energetic Labrador Retriever puppy. Chris, thanks for making time to be with us today. So what's the status of those deferred maintenance projects?
Good morning, Dan. Thanks for the invitation to present here to the IPA. Would also like to thank everybody who's attended this morning to making the time on their weekend to hear a little bit about what's going on with the Department of Natural Resources, and in this case, specifically the deferred maintenance program. Terry covered a lot of ground here, so this is a little bit more detail on an exciting piece we've got going on right now. So for those of you who aren't familiar, in the 2019 session, the General Assembly in the budget approved $150 million for funding for deferred maintenance projects across state government. So we're sharing that with other entities such as Department of Administration and Department of Corrections, those landholding type agencies. Out of that 150, 100 million approximately has been set aside for Department of Natural Resources projects, which is a really great thing for us. And we're excited to see those projects come about. We've kind of broken them into 16 different categories. And, here on the slide, we're going to cover just a few of those. I will say the bulk of them are probably behind the scenes things that the average visitor will not see. But as Tom mentioned in his opening remarks, we've had some deferred maintenance issues for a long time now. And as Terry mentioned in his portion, we've seen really heavy attendance. So we're being loved to death is the way I like to put that. So there's a lot of infrastructure needs that aren't necessarily, they're not going to be ribbon cutting opportunities, but they're things that we need to get corrected and fixed to ensure that the parks are operating properly and smoothly, and everybody's able to enjoy the properties as they do. So of those 16, ADA compliance is a big one for us. Updating in campgrounds, trail renovation. Terry mentioned a little bit earlier on the wastewater systems. That's been a real pleasant surprise for us. We had originally budgeted several projects in this $100 million to deal with wastewater treatment issues. The partnership with the Indiana Finance Authority in connecting into local municipalities has really been a revenue saver on the deferred maintenance program. So we've been able to utilize those monies on other projects. And then of course we're working on HVAC and roofing type projects. I would like to take the opportunity to give a quick shout out to our partner in this endeavor, the Indiana Department of Administration. We would just refer to them as IDOA. They are a critical partner in this for us. It's one of those things where DNR couldn't do it alone, nor could IDOA do it alone. So we're meeting on a regular basis, going through projects. They're helping us get things on the ground, and we've been really pleased with the partnership that we have with them at this point. We've broken the funding into basically 3 rounds, 3 bite-sized, really big bite-sized chunks. How about that? Round 1 consisted of 77 projects that have been completed. Of note, the Nature Center there at Pokagon State Park and office renovations. A lot of work done at the Shakamak Group Camp, including the amphitheater, but also work on the cabins and the mess hall as well too. The Aquatic Center at Lieber. And then the Brookville Nature Center and Beach House conversion is ongoing at this point. So it's one of the round 1 projects that are wrapping up. Kind of the keystone project in round 1, I think Terry mentioned it when he was talking about ends, was the renovation of the annex at the Abe Martin Lodge in Brown County State Park. So it was basically pulling those 54 guest rooms out of the system for availability, and taking them down to the studs, and basically bringing them back to life, giving a full refresh. So it was new floors. They went in the bathrooms updated, new fixtures, new furnishings, and it has turned out really great. So if you haven't had an opportunity to stop by Abe Martin recently to see those, I would encourage you to make a reservation and check that out. So the annex is on the other side of the water park. So it was the most recent addition to the Abe Martin Lodge there. Round 2 projects are currently in discussion and design. So we were doing some final walkthroughs on those. This picture you got there is going to be a familiar sight in probably all of our properties, and has been a big part of the deferred maintenance and the number of projects going on. And you're going to see a lot of new restroom facilities coming on the landscape. So we're moving away from the old traditional wooden pit toilet type structures that probably has been long overdue. And we're putting in precast concrete structures like the one you're seeing in the slide deck here. So we've got about 60 of those going in round 2 alone. There were several put in round 1 as well. It's pretty impressive to see these. They come complete and ready to just load off the truck. So there's a crane that picks them off the flatbed and drops them right on the site. They even come, with a roll of toilet paper, so they're truly ready to go once they're put on the ground. So we've got about 60 of those going in round 2. We've got 14 comfort stations in the campgrounds, which are the shower house type structures. Those are also precast type structures, which again loaded right off the back of the truck and set into place. Probably another one of the most visual pieces that we'll have in round 2 is playground restorations. So we're doing 40 playgrounds throughout the system, and with the goal of having an ADA accessible playground on every property, so at least one. A couple not so noticeable projects, but are really critical to how we do things around the system is we've got 11 underground storage tank replacement and removal projects going. So these are old fuel structures that have become outdated. So we're getting them out of the ground before they become an environmental issue. They'll be replaced with an above ground storage system. And that's a good one too, where we're also working with both the Indiana Finance Authority and our partners over at IDEM. They've both helped to chip in additional funding on those updates, again, to help our dollars stretch a little further. And then we've got 14 dams in the system that we're looking to do some work on. So everywhere we have a lake, we probably have a dam, and those all require maintenance and upkeep throughout the years. So we've got 14 of those projects scheduled for round 2. Terry mentioned a little bit earlier probably the biggest keystone piece of the round 2, which is the renovation of the Spring Mill Inn. It was budgeted at 10 million. I think Terry said 10 to 15. I think we're leaning that it'll probably be closer to 15 after they've done final walkthrough and get design. So it's currently in design phase at this point, but we're looking at, again, kind of like with Abe Martin Lodge, a renovation of guest rooms. We're looking at a reconfigure of the lobby area to make it more customer friendly. It will have true ADA accessibility. Right now, if you've been to Spring Mill Inn, the ADA accessibility runs through the dining room and then to the lobby. So we're gonna address that and be able to welcome all of our guests directly to the lobby and the front desk area. Probably the biggest behind the scenes piece of that project is going to be tying all the utilities into single systems. Throughout the years as we have done additions to the inn, we have small little utilities that don't connect into one single unit. So while we're in there, we're going to, all HVAC will be connected together, all electrical run together as well as water. So that will help us immensely in maintenance into the future and making sure our guests get good customer service. And then we'll do a dining room update and pool and event space as well. So as I mentioned a while ago, that's currently in design. It's a November closure date for the inn. So between that time and now, get design finished up, and then we have to, as with all our historic projects, go to the Historic Preservation Review Board and get approval to make sure we're keeping those historic characteristics that everybody appreciates at our properties. So that's kind of a summary of 2. Round 3, we're really getting ready to give some thought to that. And we have a list of projects that we have previously identified for that, but kind of our challenges will maybe make us look at that a little bit different. As with everything else, costs, project availability, and staffing have been really critical to our projects at this point. So I think for round 3, we're going to have to look and see, of our round 2 projects, what comes in on budget, where our budget overruns are, do a little housekeeping on that, and making sure we have the appropriate money to be able to do the things we need to do. So I don't have a full list to share on you with round 3 at this time because of those things. Terry mentioned that seasonal help was really a challenge for us, and it's that's transferred over to our contractors who are doing work with us as well too. So our timelines are running a little long, our costs are running a little higher than we anticipated, but we're fighting through those things. Overall, the project or the program has been extremely well received by the public. They've been very appreciative of the investments that they're seeing. We talked to them a little bit about the background things that they aren't necessarily able to see as a visitor, but helps make their experience a little bit better. So we look forward to continuing this. We look forward to getting through the round 3 projects. And then we look forward to going back to the legislature this next session and talking about how well this project has gone, being able to show them the projects on the ground, and then having a conversation with them about hopefully being able to make an additional investment in continuing to get us back to a level of service that our customers expect, and to have some of the infrastructure pieces that they're asking more and more for. So that's an extremely quick overview of the deferred maintenance program, and we'll look forward to questions, and we'll really look forward to showing you a great project at Spring Mill once it's complete. So thank you, Dan.
Great. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it very much. And it's gratifying to see all the progress that's being made at improving properties around the state. We've had a lot of interesting topics today. We've got a number of questions. Let's get right to those, and we'll ask our panelists to address them. This is, I think, a question for Terry Coleman concerning funding. Is there an Indiana state fund in place that can provide consistent funding? For example, in Colorado, there's a percentage of the state lottery's revenue permanently devoted to state park usage. So Terry, do you want to answer that? And then maybe Chris could join in as well.
Thanks, Dan. And I think Chris probably can provide some additional. There's several states out there that when we talk to our counterparts in other locations that have specific funding that are targeted for their state park system. The one that I'm currently most familiar with is in Missouri. Missouri's got a 1/10 of 1% fund, and it drives double-digit millions to their system every year. And Steve Locke originally brought that question up, former deputy director of Indiana State Parks, brought that up. It's a good question. I think we do not have anything in place, nor do I see anything going in place anytime soon, except for one opportunity that exists at Charlestown State Park when the Base Closures Act went through in 1996, and we received Fort Harrison State Park and what is now Charlestown State Parks at the old Army ammunition plant. Along with that came the rights to the aquifer that lays beneath that property and really Louisville and most of the river. And it's a high quality aquifer that is sought after with great demand, not only for drinking water, but industrial as well. And as River Ridge Development Corporation, the reuse authority for that property moves forward, and businesses and industry begin to generate need for water, the water sales will actually come through the Department of Natural Resources Division of State Parks. And so that could provide some level of steady funding source through water sales. And we're talking about tens of millions of gallons a day that we could pull from that aquifer safely. Actually, that aquifer is large enough to supply the city of Louisville. So Dan, that's probably all I have on that.
Okay. Chris, anything to add about funding?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Dan. And thanks for the question. I think, there have been multiple bills introduced over the years to kind of talk about that, and none of them have really gotten a good foothold. The Missouri model that Terry mentioned, there had been some initial discussion on that. There have been offshoots on that would be, a percentage of sales tax that went specifically to trails, but I don't know that it was ever park specific driven. One of the conversations we always have with our friends over at the General Assembly, anytime we get to visit with them, is the conversation about, how many visitors we're seeing. We're still seeing really heavy attendance, and that the fact that I'm not even going to call it a benefit of COVID. I'm going to say one of the things we've seen out of COVID was that, a re-engaging of people to the outdoors. So I think it helps us to have those conversations and maybe prepare to have that, funding conversation moving into the future. So we'll see as budget comes due this year during the General Assembly, how those conversations go.
All right, thanks, Chris. Another question now for you parks guys. What is being done to control invasive plant species in the parks? Volunteers and staff at Brown County have done an impressive job in attacking invasives, significantly Japanese stiltgrass, but there's more to be done. How much are staff members in the parks informed about invasives and asked to use best practices? Chris, Terry?
It's a great question, and invasive species is undoubtedly one of our most significant and greatest threats and challenges to the system as we know it. Through our stewardship section that Ginger Murphy heads, that all of you know, that is a major focus of that section of our division. And as we mentioned, we pulled about 500,000 to augment our budget. We have about 500,000 a year dedicated out of operating budget and additional funding that comes out of our preventive maintenance budget. So we're north of probably $1 million a year moving forward towards that, but it is an overwhelming battle. Anthony Sipes, who heads that program for us, it's his main reason for getting out of bed every morning. And then to the question, we get so much volunteer help, as the question describes. Brown County has Brown County and several other properties, Turkey Run and many others, have stalwart volunteers who continue to tackle that. So I think it's an ongoing problem. And again, as we talk to our colleagues across the United States at our National Association meetings, that is a major challenge across, and it's something that we keep chipping away at, and we see as more important with each passing day. So I don't have a great answer, but know that we're swinging the bat hard at it.
All right, thanks, Terry.
Hey, Dan, if I could, I'd just add in, one of the things you're seeing, number one, we couldn't do it without our volunteers. They are a great assistance to us for making it happen. But one of the things you're seeing us kind of move towards on the properties is helping manage those invasive species with fire. I was talking to the crew down at Patoka a couple of weeks ago. They put prescribed fire on the ground for 300 acres this year. So you're seeing it more and more frequently. We're using that as a mechanism. So that takes a lot of training and a lot of planning on our end. So staff are working on it in a number of different ways. But that's probably one of the ones where we're increasing the usage of most. I know we had a very sizable burn last year out at Brown County State Park as well. So
thanks for that. And more questions on invasives. This is a topic of real interest. This one is for Stephanie Schuck. There are some serious invasive locations in Indianapolis, primarily purple winter creeper along the canal and along a chain link fence on Indianapolis Public Schools property in Broad Ripple, and a stretch of Japanese knotwood along White River and Future Trail. Is there someone to contact, or should this be the weed wrangle group? Stephanie?
Yeah, so I put a link in the chat, Q&A, whichever one. And it really depends on your county. As far as we are concerned, SICM is concerned, it depends on your county. And if there is a SISMA there, that's where you would start. And so in Marion County, there is a SISMA. It's called the Circle City SISMA. And they have a website, and you can contact them. And but we also have weed wrangles that include them, and then they might be somewhere else too. So I am also in Marion County. So one thing to look for if you have invasive species and you want it to be dealt with, who owns the land? And so the one, for example, IPS, that could be a great partnership with IPS for that property. Two, once you figure out who has that land, make sure that, of course, you're able to go on that land and they understand invasive species. If it's a park or something, of course, that's pretty easy. But making sure you know who it is that you can start working with them. SICM, what we can do is for the SISMAs, they can take that project on if they have the time. I also want to make sure that everybody understands that they can't do everything all the time everywhere. So they are a group of people that are doing the best they can, but they can possibly create a weed wrangle. We can put it on our Facebook page. We have also on our SICM page, we have a Google calendar that all of our weed wrangles are posted on. And so if somebody's interested, just, okay, well, what's going on in my area? So you can go to our webpage and see all of the weed wrangles that are currently scheduled. And then we can also then get that out to everybody and help to facilitate the weed wrangle. So there are a few steps that have to happen before that happens. But I would really look at what county you're in, if there's a SISMA there. If not, you can contact me or Don Slack at SICM. Our contact information is on the website, and we can maybe connect you with somebody who can work on getting a weed wrangle scheduled.
Great, thank you, Stephanie. One more question on invasives. This may be for Stephanie. Let's start there. Is there funding available to reseed or replant areas that are targeted for invasive removal? By removing invasives, we're creating new real estate for plants to grow, both native and invasives.
And that is an excellent point, right? So cut the honeysuckle, and you have to go back to make sure more honeysuckle doesn't come up. And especially if it's an established, they've been established there for a while, the first thing that's going to probably pop up is more honeysuckle, because you've opened up that space and the sun is there and those seedlings are like, woo. So you definitely have to make sure you monitor it afterwards. And then I always let people know, depending on the area, it depends on what habitat is and what the area is like. But patience, wait and see what comes back. And then once you give it a year and see what comes back, monitor it for other invasives coming in, because what also might happen is you get rid of the honeysuckle and then the garlic mustard moves in, or any other invasive species. So you have to monitor for that, but also monitor for the native stuff, the good stuff, see what comes back, and then you can supplement that with native species. There honestly is a lot of money out there, and I definitely can't give you an extensive list. On our website, we do have, it's the SISMAs and funding page. There are several links there to funding opportunities for both invasive species removal and restoration with native plants. The Native Plant Society, the Indiana Native Plant Society, has a grant for native plantings, and lots of information on their website as well. So they're a great resource for that. So yeah, it's out there.
All right, thanks, Stephanie. Well, here's one more good question, and I'll throw this open. I would like to hear, it's probably relevant for Terry or Chris, but I'd also like to get Steve Walters' take on this. For any or all of our speakers, if you had a visitor from out of state who has never been to Indiana and they only had time to visit one state park, where would you take them?
Dan, that sounds like a really hard question, but for me, it really isn't. And much to the chagrin of Milt Grissom, who I know is on here today, and my boss, Chris, I would, without a doubt, immediately go to Turkey Run State Park. And this is why. Turkey Run State Park was our second state park, but it was the impetus for our state park system, and it was the impetus of Colonel Richard Lieber and that group that was moving Indiana towards a state park system at the same time the national park system was forming in or just before 1916. So for us, that's the place where it all started. Although McCormick's Creek ended up being Indiana's first state park, the impetus for our system and Colonel Richard Lieber and his team were there. So that's where I would immediately take someone. And let's face it, it's one of the most beautiful and rare habitats that we have in the state of Indiana.
Do we have a different opinion? Anybody want to argue for a different park to take somebody first?
Well, sure. It's like your kids. You love them all, but how do you pick one? I'm going to pick where I started. How about that? Spring Mill. I'd take them to Spring Mill. Just the variety of different features there. So we talked about Donaldson Woods there, a virgin timber stand. You've got the Pioneer Village. You have the Space Museum. You have the boat ride through Twin Caves. So there's a ton of different things to do there. And it's not because I grew up there, and it's not because I started there.
Okay. Quickly, I'm going to ask Steve Walter. You're not with the state park system. What's your take on all of this?
No, but I appreciate being asked. And I tell Terry this all the time, and it's an honest, I tell this to people all the time, is Indiana has a remarkable state park and preserve system. I mean, for the Midwest in an older state, we are blessed with a tremendous variety of parks, preserves, and it's wonderful. I grew up in the lake country of Minnesota, so there's a couple places. I mean, I love McCormick's Creek. I love Turkey Run. I just love all the parks, but there's this affinity I have for canoes and water and big water. And I think maybe we're a little jaded in the Midwest, but when you take a new visitor to the Great Lakes and you let them see that, particularly I think Indiana Dunes State Park, and they get that access and they look and there's Chicago over here and there's pristine wilderness behind them and preserves. And I mean, I think that that's just a powerful experience about wise decision making in a place that sometimes wise decisions weren't made in Indiana. So that's my choice, but I love them all. So.
Oh, great. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Hey, I want to end this and get outside after all this talk about the parks. What a robust discussion. So let's leave it there, and let's bring back Tom Holman of the Indiana Parks Alliance for a few closing comments. Tom?
Thanks, Dan. This has really been great. So I want to talk a little, first of all, this has been fantastic, all these discussions and everything. I will add one thing as far as the favorite park thing. I personally agree with Terry. Dunes makes a strong case for that, but yeah, my personal favorite is Turkey Run. But one modifier: during the summer, I'd go to Shades, where you're going to see a lot of the same type of area and avoid the crowds. And then in the wintertime, take a hike, go across the bridge and hike up the canyon there in the wintertime with snow. It's just fantastic. So talking about Parks Alliance, our website, certainly check out our website. And if you're not an IPA member, consider joining us. We'd love to have you as a member as we continue to support these fantastic facilities that we have, these properties and nature preserve, the parks and nature preserves. Join us there on Facebook at Indiana Parks Alliance. We have a site there that we're getting better at doing more updates on that. It's difficult sometimes to keep a constant stream of information there, but we're doing a lot better job on that now, I think. But check those out. Friends groups. Want to put in a plug for the friends groups. IPA Indiana Parks Alliance is a statewide group, and what we try to do is on a statewide level and advocating for the park system as a whole. Most of the parks, I don't know, 2/3 or 3/4 of them have local friends groups that do the on the boots work with volunteers and projects on those properties. And I encourage you, if you have a favorite park or if you live around the state near one of these parks, join that local friends group. It's great if you can go to their meetings and volunteer. If not, give them some financial support, join them. And this is a rather long address to get to that, but there's an easier way if you can't remember all that. Google Indiana State Park Friends. When I Google that on my computer, the first thing that comes up is this site that I've just given you here with through the DNR website. So do that and join a local friends group, support the work they do. This photo shows some down at Spring Mill, some actually with one of our grants that we gave them for planting some trees down there in the park. And then by all means, to help our efforts and state parks, contact your legislators. The one thing I tell people, keep it simple. Tell your legislator that conservation is important to you and that state parks and state nature preserves are important to you. And then that makes it easier when we talk to them, that they know that their constituents feel that that's important. And because most of them really do try to represent their constituents in the legislature, whether we agree with what they do all the time. My guess is that many of us don't agree with what the legislature does a lot, but tell them what's important. You can send them emails through the website. Go to iga.in.gov, or again, Google Indiana General Assembly, and that'll come up too. But that's a pretty easy one to remember. Indiana General Assembly, iga.in.gov. And you find your legislator there and send them an email. That's the way they get the bulk of their contact today. With that, I'll turn it back over to Dan.
All right, thanks, Tom. Thank you. Well, we're grateful to the Eppley Institute for hosting, and a shout out to Troy McCormick of Natural Concepts for that stunning video that we saw when we were waiting for us to begin here. Special thanks to all our speakers for sharing your insights and expertise with us today. And thanks to all of you for participating in IPA's second virtual event. We'll follow up with an email soon with a link to a recording of today's forum in case you want to review anything, and also to ask for your comments and suggestions on today's event. So please look for that message next week. We'd love your help in making our next session even more relevant and stimulating. Well, that's all. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe, and we'll see you in the great Indiana outdoors.